Hey everyone. It seems like everywhere you turn these days, people are talking about how crazy the auto world is right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Car prices are just out of control.
Out of control.
EVs are still kind of like a luxury for most of us.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing Chinese automakers making some pretty bold moves. So in this deep dive, we're going to try to make sense of it all. Explore if EVs are actually living up to all the hype we've been hearing.
Yeah.
And uncover, what's behind these sky-high prices.
Right.
And by the end, we're going to get you ready to navigate this crazy car-buying landscape. So buckle up, because things are changing fast in the auto world.
What I think is so interesting about this moment in the auto industry is that we're kind of seeing this perfect storm of different factors all coming together at the same time. You've probably felt it yourself. Sticker shock when you go to the dealership.
Well, yeah.
Insurance premiums just going up and up and up. You kind of get that feeling that owning a car is becoming more and more of a luxury.
It definitely feels like the days of affordable cars are long gone. And what about electric vehicles? Like, we were all promised that EVs were going to be the answer to our prayers.
Right.
Not just financially, but also environmentally.
Yeah, environmentally.
And it doesn't seem like that's really panning out.
Yeah, well, this Finance Buzz article, 10 Reasons Why Electric Vehicles Are Still So Expensive, kind of unpacks that whole idea.
Okay.
And, it turns out that owning an EV, the cost goes way beyond just the initial price tag,
Right.
For example, did you know that replacing an EV battery can cost you over $15,000?
Wow. $15,000?
Yeah.
That's more than some used cars.
Exactly, and it's something that a lot of people don't really even factor in when they're thinking about going electric.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you've got higher insurance rates for EVs compared to gas-powered cars.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the whole charging thing. Finding a charging station, waiting for your car to charge.
Yeah.
It all adds up,
It really does.
It does.
So it sounds like EVs might not be the silver bullet solution we were all hoping for.
Maybe not.
But there's something else that's kind of brewing out there that could really shake things up.
Yes.
And that's the rise of Chinese automakers. I mean, they're not just dipping their toes in the water anymore, are they?
No, not at all.
They're going all in.
Yeah. Electric is reporting that BYD, and they're a major Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer.
Right.
They are about to close a deal for a massive EV plant in Mexico. And get this, they're aiming to sell 50,000 vehicles there this year alone.
50,000. That's a serious statement. What is fueling this crazy expansion?
Well, it's a few things, actually. The CS Monitor highlights how Chinese automakers really benefit from government subsidies.
Okay.
And they have lower production costs, which means they can offer much more competitive prices.
So they can undercut the competition on price. That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And I've been hearing some buzz about this BYD Dolphin.
Yes.
Or the Seagull, I think it's sometimes called.
Yes, the Seagull.
This little mini EV.
Yes.
It's priced incredibly low, right?
Super low.
Like, could this be the thing that finally makes EVs accessible to everyone?
It very well could be. I mean, this pricing strategy has the potential to be really disruptive to the market. I mean, just imagine a world where EVs are actually cheaper than gas-powered cars.
Whoa. That would be a huge shift.
It would.
But wait a second. Didn't President Biden put some pretty hefty tariffs on Chinese EVs to protect American manufacturers?
He did. The CS Monitor reported that those tariffs are currently sitting at 102.5%.
102.5%.
Yeah. And the goal was, as you said, to sort of protect the American companies from being priced out of their own market.
Okay, so how are companies like BYD getting around those tariffs? Are they just like eating the cost?
Well, that's where this Mexico strategy gets really interesting.
Okay.
By setting up shop in Mexico, they can actually take advantage of the USMCA trade agreement.
Okay.
And avoid those tariffs entirely.
Oh, it's like a loophole. So they're sidestepping the tariffs.
We are.
And they're gaining direct access to the U.S. market.
Exactly.
That's a pretty clever move.
It is.
But what does this mean for the American auto industry?
Yeah.
Are they just going to stand by and watch this happen?
It's definitely putting a lot of pressure on them.
Yeah.
American manufacturers are now facing competition, not just from the brands that they've always competed with, but now these new players that can produce cars for much less.
Yeah.
So it's a really challenging situation for them, for sure.
It makes you wonder, will American consumers actually be swayed by the lower prices of these Chinese EVs?
Right.
Even if it means, switching from the brands that they know and they're familiar with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, is brand loyalty going to win out, or is it going to be all about the price tag?
Yeah, yeah.
It's really fascinating.
It is. It's a fascinating dynamic, and I bet a lot of our listeners are wondering what this means for their own wallets.
Absolutely. And that actually brings us to another really crucial piece of this puzzle, the financial strain that we're seeing across the whole auto industry, particularly among consumers. Have you heard about Cathie Wood's recent warning?
Oh, you mean the investor who's known for, like, her bold predictions about all these, like, disruptive technologies?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm all ears. What's she saying?
Well, she's basically sounding the alarm about auto loan delinquencies. And according to her research, they're now surpassing even the levels that we saw back in 2009 during the financial crisis.
Whoa. That's a pretty scary statistic. What does that tell us about the state of the auto industry and, like, the people buying these cars?
Well, I think it really suggests that a lot of people are struggling to actually afford their car payments, which could be a sign of, some underlying instability in the auto loan market. It kind of paints this picture of an industry that's facing challenges on all sides.
Yeah.
You've got these rising costs, you've got these new competitors, and maybe even like a shaky financial foundation.
That's a lot to digest. But before we get too overwhelmed, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about a potential solution to some of these cost concerns surrounding EVs.
Okay.
Solar-powered charging.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right.
Yeah?
Now, it's still a developing technology, but solar charging could really help to, like, mitigate some of the expenses of owning an EV.
Yeah. I mean, just think about it. If you could harness the power of the sun to charge your car,
right?
How much of a game changer would that be?
It would be amazing. And we're already starting to see some pretty cool examples of this in action. Like, the Hyundai Sonata Hybrid?
Yeah.
It comes with a solar roof.
It does.
And it actually extends the car's range.
That's right. And then there are also, aftermarket solar charging kits available for Tesla owners.
Awesome.
So, obviously it's not going to solve all of the cost issues overnight.
Right.
But it's definitely a step in the right direction.
For sure. For sure. And the research in this field is really starting to pick up steam, too.
As is. Yeah.
This PLOS One article that we have, it highlights some really interesting research on solar-powered charging infrastructure.
Yeah.
Just imagine a world where we have, like, widespread solar-powered charging stations everywhere.
Yeah.
It could make EVs so much more accessible, more affordable, and obviously more environmentally friendly.
Exactly. It's definitely a vision worth striving for. Yeah. And I think it's a good reminder that even with all this uncertainty and all this disruption, there's still a lot of hope for innovation and progress in the auto industry.
Yeah, yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground already, but I want to pause here and bring it back to you, the listener. What does all of this actually mean for you as a car buyer?
Yeah.
Like, what should you be thinking about as you're trying to navigate this crazy, ever-changing landscape?
Right. And that's a great question. And it's actually one that we'll be diving into a lot deeper in the next part of our deep dive.
Nice. So stay tuned because we're just getting started.
We are. It's easy to get kind of caught up in the big picture when we're talking about all these trends in the auto industry. Yeah. Tariffs, global competition, new technologies. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to the choices that individual car buyers are making.
Absolutely. So let's bring it back to you, the listener.
Yeah.
What does all this mean for your next car purchase? We've given you a ton of information, but what are the key takeaways here?
Okay, well, the first thing I think you need to really consider is that owning an electric vehicle might not be as simple or as affordable as you initially thought.
Yeah.
I mean, those hidden costs that we talked about, battery replacement, insurance, the logistics of charging, all that stuff can really add up.
So it's not just about that, like, shiny new sticker price, right? Yeah. You have to play the long game and think about the total cost of ownership.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about this influx of Chinese automakers? How does that play into a consumer's decision?
That's where things get really interesting. Yeah. So the arrival of companies like BYD could actually mean more affordable EV options for people, which is great news if you're on a budget.
Yeah.
But there are also some other things you have to weigh. Like, are there potential quality differences compared to these more established brands that we're used to?
It's a tough call. Like, do you go for the cheaper option or stick with, a brand that you know and trust.
Right.
Buying a car is a big investment. You want to make sure you're getting your money's worth.
Absolutely. And while solar charging is super promising,
Yeah.
it's not like a widespread solution just yet.
Right.
So you really need to weigh all your priorities and do your research.
Speaking of research, this Benzinga article about rising auto loan delinquency rates,
Yeah,
that is kind of concerning.
it is.
It sounds like even people with good credit are struggling to keep up with their car payments.
Yeah, and that kind of echoes Kathy Wood's warning about the auto loan market. You know, it seems like all these rising costs we've been talking about, sticker prices, dealer markups, insurance, they're putting a serious strain on people's budgets.
It makes you wonder if we're headed for like a car affordability crisis, especially with this big push for EVs,
Yeah.
Which are still considerably more expensive than gas-powered cars for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's definitely a valid concern. And then, of course, we have to think about the whole geopolitical angle of all this. I mean, we talked about President Biden's tariffs on Chinese EVs.
Yeah.
But what about the implications of these companies setting up shop in Mexico?
Yeah. I mean, they're basically outmaneuvering those tariffs.
Yes, they are.
And gaining a foothold in the U.S. market. It's like a game of chess.
It is.
Each side making strategic moves.
Right.
And the winner of this game,
Right.
it's going to have huge consequences for both the American and Chinese auto industries.
Exactly.
If Chinese EVs actually gain traction in the U.S., it could force American companies to, adapt and innovate much faster than they are now.
I think so.
It'll be interesting to see how American consumers respond to these new options,
Yeah.
Will they be open to buying Chinese-made EVs? Or will they just stick with what they know?
Yeah. Will they stick with those familiar brands? Will quality concerns be a factor in their decisions?
Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting to watch it all unfold.
Yeah.
It's hard to predict exactly how it's all going to play out.
So I guess as a car buyer right now, knowledge is your best defense.
Absolutely.
You really need to stay informed about the changing landscape, about the new technologies,
Right.
about the evolving market forces.
It's a lot. We're bombarded with information all the time these days.
Right.
But you have to try to filter through all the noise and figure out what's actually relevant to your own personal needs.
Now, before we wrap up this part, I want to touch on something that's been on my mind this whole time.
Okay.
The environmental impact of all these changes happening in the auto industry.
Right.
I mean, we're talking a lot about this shift towards EVs, but isn't there a whole other set of environmental concerns that come with EV production?
There are, yeah. I mean, it's not as simple as EVs are good for the environment and gas cars are bad for the environment.
Like the mining of the materials for EV batteries.
Yeah.
That raises some big questions about sustainability and ethical sourcing.
Absolutely.
And, we've talked about solar charging.
Yeah.
But, even solar panels, the production and disposal of those, those have environmental footprints as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like a reminder that there's no magic bullet here.
No.
When it comes to creating a sustainable future for the auto industry.
Yeah, it's a complex problem.
We have to be thinking about the entire life cycle of these technologies.
Right.
From the sourcing and production to the use and disposal.
Exactly.
And we also need to continue to invest in research to try to find, even more environmentally friendly solutions.
Right.
I came across this article in Energy Theory
that
talked about flexible solar panels for EVs.
Interesting.
Imagine that. Your car basically charging itself with these flexible solar panels integrated into the body of the car.
That would be so cool. It really shows you the potential for continued innovation in this field.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately it all comes back to informed decision making. As consumers, we actually have the power to choose the vehicles and the technologies that align with our values.
And that brings us back to you, the listener. As you're taking in all this information and you're thinking about your next car purchase, remember that the choices you make, they have ripple effects.
They do.
It's not just impacting your wallet, but the environment and the future of the auto industry as a whole.
It's all connected. We're all part of this evolving story. And it's up to all of us to kind of steer it in a direction that benefits, both people and the planet.
Well said. Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
If the future of transportation really is electric, like a lot of people seem to think it is, what role will solar charging play in that transition?
That's a great question. I mean, we've seen some really promising advancements in solar charging technology,
Yeah.
but there's still a lot more to explore.
Just imagine a world where you could harness the power of the sun
Yeah,
to fuel your daily commute.
that would be amazing.
It's a vision that I think is worth pursuing,
Absolutely.
but it's going to require a lot of collective effort from consumers, from investors,
Yeah,
from policymakers.
for sure.
We need to keep pushing for innovation,
Yeah.
demanding more sustainable options,
Right.
and really create those incentives to accelerate the adoption of these renewable energy technologies.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a call to action for all of us
Absolutely.
to be a part of the solution here. The future of transportation is in our hands, and it's up to us to steer it towards, a brighter and more sustainable horizon.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive into the auto industry, it really feels like we're at a crossroads. It's not as simple as choosing between an electric car or a gas-powered car anymore.
Right.
It's so much more complicated than that.
Right.
It feels like we have to navigate this whole web of different factors that are reshaping the entire landscape of transportation.
I think that's a really good point. You've got all these economic pressures. We've got these technological advancements that are happening so quickly, geopolitical maneuvering, and then you've got, of course, the environmental concerns. It's a lot to take in, even for those of us who, follow this industry all the time.
Speaking of economic pressures, this article that I was reading from Car Dealership Guy News really caught my eye. It was talking about how even prime borrowers, people with excellent credit scores, are starting to struggle with auto loan delinquencies.
Yeah.
That's kind of a red flag, isn't it?
It is, and it really highlights what we were talking about earlier, like the financial strain that so many people are under right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you combine rising interest rates with the crazy car prices we're seeing, and then these dealer markups on top of everything else.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It makes you wonder if this is a bubble that's about to burst.
Yeah.
Are we going to see demand just drop off a cliff because people simply cannot afford new cars anymore?
Right.
Or will people's desire for the latest EVs and the self-driving technology, will that be enough to keep sales going?
That's the big question. It's like this tug of war between wanting the newest, coolest thing and the reality of what people can actually afford. And then on top of that, you have to think about all those other external factors that could come into play. Things like the chip shortage that's been going on, or the rising cost of raw materials. That stuff can have a huge impact on production and pricing for all these vehicles.
It's a good reminder that the auto industry is really connected to this much larger global system.
Yes.
It's not untouchable when it comes to supply chain disruptions, political instability, fluctuations in oil prices. All of that stuff matters.
All of it. And for the average car buyer, it can feel overwhelming trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do today.
Yeah.
Shed some light on all of this so that you can make the best decisions for your own situation.
So if we could boil everything down that we've talked about into one key takeaway for our listeners, what would it be?
I would say stay informed. Knowledge is power, especially in a market like this where things are changing so quickly. Do your research, compare those prices, make sure you're factoring in those hidden costs that we talked about. Think about your long-term needs. Don't let yourself get swayed by flashy marketing, or feel pressured into making a decision that you're not totally comfortable with.
Really well said. And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into this auto industry shakeup. What a ride.
It has been. I really hope our listeners have found this whole conversation helpful and insightful.
Me too. And remember, everyone, the road ahead might be full of twists and turns.
Yeah.
But with a little bit of knowledge and a lot of careful consideration, I think you can navigate it with confidence.
For sure.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.